Well, less than 2 weeks away from the deadline to get tariffs off steel and aluminum, U.S. President Donald Trump targets another metal.
We did steel, as you know, they're 50%. We did aluminum, 50%. Lumber just came out. Now, today we're doing copper. I believe the tariff on copper, we're going to make it 50%.
So this copper tariff comes one day after the president announced new tariff rates for more than a dozen countries around the world, but he's delayed imposing those until August 1st. That's all in a push by the White House to strike more trade deals. So where does all this leave Canada? Well, William Pellerin is an international trade lawyer with Macmillan Vantage, and he joins you now. William, it's good to see you again. Thanks for being here, sir.
Thanks, David. Great being here.
Donald Trump is tariffing the entire periodic table the way he's going. I mean, what do you make of this in terms of the chances that Canada can get a deal by the 21st of July with the U.S., all of this stuff?
Yeah, it really feels like we're playing a gigantic game of whack-a-mole where Canadian businesses are the mole that try to come up for air and just get hit with a hammer over and over. In this case, it certainly is likely very disruptive to a deal being achieved as between Canada and the United States. I mean, admittedly, the effects here on copper are a little bit more muted than they are, for example, on steel or autos. Canada produces a good amount of copper, but ships a lot of it off to Asia for processing, and then it goes into the United States. So maybe the impact is more on the U.S. consumer than on Canadian businesses. But then, nonetheless, this is definitely going to hurt some sectors of the Canadian economy, and probably might delay us a little bit on reaching our own deal with the U.S.
But, you know, here it is, yet another tariff under the Section 232 law, right? That it's national security, right? He did this with autos, he did this with steel, he did this with aluminum. I mean, how do you even begin to navigate a negotiation with an administration that uses national security laws, threats, as the justification for practically everything?
That's exactly that's a good question. I mean, this is principally to deal with China. And let's not forget that the United States gets there's a lot of copper coming from China. China is the largest producer of refined copper in the world by quite some margin. And so it once again looks like Canada gets, you know, a little bit of collateral damage here. Though we are an important producer, we're nowhere near as large as China. So it really does throw us for a loop every time that the U.S. president wants to do something on national security, and we get hit by accident, though he'll never say that or admit to that. So very difficult, and that's why I think the government has been trying to negotiate security and defense deal with the United States, where in exchange for that kind of secure binational border security and national defense arrangement, we can get knocked off the list of these Section 232 sectoral tariffs.
Yeah, until there's another list. I mean, this is the challenge, right? That you just stick you on that one. But, you know, the copper is one thing. There were the series of letters sent out yesterday, Bosnia, Thailand, Vietnam, you know, countries from all over the place, getting their new tariff rate, but then delaying these so-called Liberation Day tariffs until August 1st. What do you make of this, that he announces the big number, but then he also then punts it down the road a little bit? It creates the uncertainty and the disruption, but it never really brings it to a resolution. Yeah,
it's certainly a head spinning for sure. And every time it looks like things have gotten quiet a little bit on the tariff front, this comes out of nowhere. I mean, the copper piece in particular, we were expecting far later down in the year, even early next year. They were supposed to investigate, produce a report from the Department of Commerce, then the president would look at it. So I think everyone was hoping that there would be quite a bit more time. There's a number of other 232 investigations in the works, including on lumber, on critical minerals, on trucks. And so if these start coming down fast and furious, the Canadian economy and global economy will certainly hurt. And then you add to that the confusion around countries receiving a mailed letter telling them what their tariff rate is going to be, irrespective of any and all negotiations that have been in the works. And I think here about the U.S. and South Korea and the U.S. and Japan, for example. Both those countries were just advised, you know, by letter what their tariff rate would be. is quite a shocking development.
Yeah, there's a threat out there now from the president, too, of pharma threats of 200%, a tariff on pharmaceuticals of 200% to try to repatriate drug manufacturing. But, the South Korea example you mentioned, I was reading good reporting in the New York Times today. South Korea, to try to deal with the tariffs, promised to help the Americans rebuild shipbuilding. Japan, wanted to buy LNG. Thailand, Vietnam looked at, we'll buy more jets, we'll do these things. And there was no threshold of appeasement. They all just got hit, and it brings me back to what you said about the target here is China, that he seems to be wanting to threaten these countries to disentangle any kind of business they have with China, to choose between China or the biggest consumer market on earth. I mean, is it really as simple as that the world has to turn its back on China and towards the United States to avoid this?
Perhaps a little bit oversimplistic, but I agree with you. That's the general trend, certainly. And you can tell also, your point is a really good one, because each of those letters to South Korea, to Japan, to the other countries, actually included a clause that dealt with transshipment, right? Mm-hmm. Goods coming from China have an additional kicker of 40% or something of the sort. So it really does seem like the U.S. is trying to reshape global trade patterns and create a you versus us, U.S. corner versus China corner. The danger, of course, is by going so hard and violently at allied countries that you end up pushing them in the opposite direction than you actually want. So that's certainly the risk, and the U.S. is certainly playing with fire there.
So we've got about 13 days, I think it is, until the July 21 date, which is sort of the new deadline for Canada to have this all resolved, or the steel retaliation tariffs will come, is what Prime Minister Carney has said. I mean, when you look at the less than 2-week window that exists, I mean, what are your thoughts of the state of play between Canada and the U.S. right now?
It's hard to say. I mean, ultimately, Canada has been quite good at not negotiating on Twitter or on Truth Social and keeping the negotiations to the negotiation room. The U.S., of course, with President Trump, came out with a threat with respect to the digital service tax and supply management. Ultimately, Canada was able to get back to the table by dropping that digital service tax that the United States didn't like. So from all intents and purposes, the negotiations at least appear from the outside to be on track. We're hearing good things generally, and anytime you're not getting a Truth Social tweet going the other way, I think that's good news. So I think there's a lot of hope out there. This is probably an additional piece that throws the Canadian negotiators for a loop a little bit, though I have to say it was probably not unexpected. I mean, the whole idea of these negotiations between Canada and the United States is to get these Section 232 tariffs removed, right? These national security tariffs have to go, whether it's steel, aluminum, or autos, and now copper. The idea is these have to get dropped, and if we can get a deal to drop all the 232s, then we will accomplish that objective.
So William, just as a final point, in most negotiations and in trade negotiations, you make some gains here, you give some concessions there. Canada's already thrown the digital services tax overboard. Whatever you think of that policy, it was going to be about $1 billion a year in revenue, and it's gone now. It seems like with this president and with the way he's conducting this thing, it's tough to see where the gains are, other than as much of a return to normal as possible, that it is largely just a zero-sum negotiation and the U.S. has to come out a winner or it just won't go away.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's right. It's very difficult to say that we will give you something here and please be reasonable elsewhere. The modus operandi of the U.S. Administration right now seems to be, we want wins on absolutely everything all the time. And that's not a normal place to be in a negotiation. So I think part of it is attention span. If we can solve the issues that are front of mind at the moment where they're front of mind, then maybe we can achieve something and get the dialogue back in place. But I ultimately agree with you. The idea here for Canada is just to get back to respect for the trade agreement that President Trump himself negotiated, in his first term. So if we can get there, then I think we're back to being in a healthy place. absent the digital service tax, as you mentioned.
Yes, a deal that someone once called one of the best trade deals in history, a near perfect deal. We'll see if we can get back there. William Pellerin, always appreciate the time. That's William Pellerin. He's an international trade lawyer with Macmillan Vantage.